I go first. Um, some ground rules since I'm opening the session. Can we put our phones on silent or something? So, Lorato, jy kan maar sê wanneer ons kan begin live. All right, we can go live. Just give me a count in, and then you say action. All right, guys, good morning to the second day of Dunk 2023 of Dit is 'n Nood-Kaap Ding. I'm very excited to see you guys back here. Those people online, welcome. I hope you are watching. If it's one, I love you. If it's more than one, I love you too. So there's no there's no discrimination. So today there is a couple of changes in the program, and I think it's changes that you're going to like. And these changes is very unfortunate because one of the sessions that I really look forward to was the one of Prof. Quentin Williams, because what I asked him to come and do is a workshop on how to initiate the dictionary, because there's a lot of words that is formed, there's a lot of words that is getting lost. So one of the things, especially in the Makulan, is there's still a lot of words that is influenced by the language, and one of the presentations today is going to on that one, in the Makulan South. So that is the reason that we ask him so to kind of give a workshop to community members here and academics. So if you go into those spaces, then you can have a kind of tool to access that type of but unfortunately, Prof. Quentin Williams and some of his team is not well. And he's supposed to lead the session, so he can't. So what we then decided is that, you see there's Jacob Kluter changing the narrative. I'm going to come off the program, yay. And what we're going to do is we're going to shift Bridget. So means we're going to put into that specific space. Mondelike gevalle van misverstande na aanleiding van die literêre teks stories, 'n pragmatiese benadering. I didn't know my Afrikaans is beautiful, but we're going to put that on the second session. And then what we also going to do is the exhibitions. We're going to do all of that downstairs, and it is going to be live from downstairs. And then we finish the day downstairs. So after lunch, you guys are free. Explore the castle, explore the city. Please be safe. So it now gives me a great pleasure to introduce my sister, colleague, comrade in arms, fighter, not fighting in Julius Malema sense, but but Komis, the one that's always fighting. fighting the demons of academia and communities. Her name is Dr. Mokoena. And so the academic who holds a PhD in linguistics. She's currently served as a senior lecturer in the Department of Linguistics of Modern Languages at the University of UNISA. For a couple of months, she was still a UW's person, but then she left. But she's mark timing. She's on her way back. She is the founder, proud founder of this particular colloquium, and it focuses on this. And then she is an award winner in community engagement. She produces films. She writes a book. There's a book marked that is going to shift some landscape. I can't say a lot of things. She's very secretive, but there's a book coming out very soon. 2024 is a book coming out. It's going to mess up a lot of people. It's going to spark a conversation. That book is coming out. And then she also is the author of a very personal book, which takes us, and part of that book is on our website. So, Dr. Mokoena, with that introduction, I'm going to go that way so you don't hit me. Let's give let's give it up to Dr. Mokoena.
This is what happens when you let your brother introduce you. Then you get told I'm a fighter when I'm really not a fighter. Colleagues, good morning. Goeiemorgen. Dumelang. It's so good to see you again. I don't like speaking with mics, but I understand the technology that surrounds me. So I'm just trying to pull up the PowerPoint on my end. I can see it here and you can see it there. Lovely. Testing. That's it. Right. So like Jacob introduced me, I am Lorato Mokoena. I am from the University of South Africa. I'm a senior lecturer there. And of course, this is the third annual that is a Nood-Kaap Colloquium. It's so good to see you. My topic for today is on Oranje. I'm going to be speaking about Oranje. And I just want to put a disclaimer out from the get-go. I consider myself to be an academic that speaks about things that other people would not want to speak about. I am interested in finding out and talking about those things where people are like, but how could you and why did you, right? And so me speaking about Oranje does not mean that I agree with anything or disagree with anything that happens in Oranje and around Oranje. As an academic and as a researcher, and for those who are postgraduate students, our job is to go and find answers. Our job is to go and investigate things that ordinarily we would run away from. And you would notice I am black, and the majority of people that stay in Oranje are white. And so already that gives you a sense of how tricky this work was. But I enjoyed it. I thoroughly did. I went to Oranje twice. And so my talk for today is titled Oranje, right? Is it a rupture, a legacy, or a ruptured legacy, right? And hopefully you'll join me as we just rethink Oranje. And we just get to sit and ponder about Oranje, right? So technology allows me. There we go. Right, so for those of you who are not familiar, or let me rather start. What comes to your mind when you think about Oranje? Mind and mouth. You can just shout it out. Cook sister? All right. What else? Racist. Elitist. White. People in fear. That's interesting. Anything else? To a day so Google? Anything else? Nothing else? Protect what is ours? You mean what is theirs, right? Oh, okay, just double checking. Okay, anything else? Right? An enclave. A specific one or just a normal enclave? A specific one, right? So the words that came out of your mouth and to this mic, nothing of this except protect what is ours has sort of a positive frame about Oranje, right? Whenever people speak about Oranje, generally it's this place apartheid still lives and black people can't go, and it's just somewhere in the world of wherever. But Oranje is actually in the Northern Cape. I just thought I should let you know. It's right here in the Northern Cape. And Oranje, although on private land and all this, it is no? Actually go to Oranje, right? And so thinking about Oranje then, and so that's one of the signs that you come across when you enter Oranje. As you can see, it's written in Afrikaans, and that's very intentional. Afrikaans is the official language of Oranje, right? And so then, of course, when we think about Oranje then, a brief background really. And here, I'm not even going to quote a lot of people with you. It says the Oranje settlement as a private entity displays similar characteristics as any private company in South Africa under national or governmental administration. I'll skip all the rest. What's important to know is that Oranje is not a Volksstad. Let's start somewhere. Oranje can't be a Volksstad. Constitutional. Because a Volksstad means a country. You can't have a country within a country. That is why South Africa, beginning of the Constitution, it says the Republic of South Africa is one sovereign democratic state. So I thought before we go anywhere, let's get that out of the way. Oranje can't be a Volksstad. Nobody has ordained it as a Volksstad. It was an ideal. It was something that they would have hoped would happen, but constitutionally, the doors are shut for now, right? So whenever people speak about Oranje, they're like, yes, this white Volksstad, we're white people. So for me, terminology is very important because it determines how and why we think about a place. So if in your mind already you understand it's not a country and that Oranje people are South Africans with a South African ID, do you already see how that shapes how you think about them? It's not a country. You can go, right? So for me, this was important to put out there because part of the work that I'm doing and part of the work that Jacob alluded to is the reality that we need to keep changing narratives about places. And Oranje is not left out of that narrative. So the first thing I did when I did work on Oranje and still doing is to challenge the first myth that it's not a Volksstad. And you don't have to go very far to read. You just have to read what a Volksstad is and the principle of self-determination. And that is what Oranje is based on. And that right is in the Constitution. Everybody has the right to self-determination. They just took it very seriously. I'm just saying. And actually had the money to buy the land on which they could practice self-determination. Do we see the distinction there? Right, so we're getting somewhere. And of course then, when we talk about ruptures, legacies, or a ruptured legacy, which is what I'm going to be speaking about today, I would like to take you through just a few basic definitions, and this is really nothing that I took from anywhere. I Googled these things, found the one that speaks to me most. So when we speak about a rupture, for me, what resonated with me about this specific understanding of rupture is the breach of a harmonious relationship. That's what a rupture is. We used to get along, and then we're no longer getting along. Or we used to benefit each other, and now we're not benefiting each other anymore. So, back a drug. Somewhere somebody must leave. So for me, that's what a rupture is, right? And of course then, when we think through legacy, when we always think about legacy, when I hear legacy, I think money. I'm like inheritance, a will, bursary baby, sponsorship baby, like there's money involved. I never thought of a legacy as something that could be negative, right? But however, most of the time in its basic meaning, a legacy is something that really is a substantial gift, right? That needs to be properly managed. And I will show you how Oranje has managed to properly manage their legacy, right? And of course then, ruptured legacy, which is a term, it's like a torn cloth. You know when you have a torn cloth? And I would know this because back in the days I used to torn my clothes quite a lot. The thing tears and then, now you're trying to bring it back, but it doesn't quite look the same. And it just when you've tried to sew something together, it just does not look the same anymore. So we're going to think through how Oranje then presents itself as a gescheurde lap. And for those who are visual learners like I am, you know how people these days wear torn clothes and it still looks fashionable? That's what I sort of think of a ruptured legacy. It's ruptured, but we can still use it. It's ruptured, but we can still wear it and still find benefit in it, right? So I'll be talking through those three terms about Oranje. And of course, then the first thing we're going to be talking about as I enter now is the raptures. And there I have a very long quote for you that explains that if you did not know that the Afrikaners are not, well, the Afrikaners are not from South Africa. They come from the Netherlands. So the Afrikaners basically settled after a while, had a fight with the people there, and they were like, you know what, we don't want. So the first rapture I'm talking about is the rapture of the Afrikaners that are now in South Africa from their ancestral land, right, which is the Netherlands, right, and the Dutch and all of those places up there, right? So you can read there, it's a very long quote, but all it speaks about is how Jan van Riebeeck brought them, and then they settled, and after a while, after a couple of fights, somebody was like, you know what, I'm an Afrikaner. And that is where the first sort of settlement started, right? And of course, then the second rapture, which is known as the Great Trek, is when they were like, you know what, we don't like what is happening down here. We are going to move inwards, right? So you sort of found this rapture of the Afrikaners, or the people that are now settled in Oranje from the Cape Colony, as they move to go find sort of their own hive and their own business up there, because they were not dealing with what's happening down in the Cape Colony, right? This thing is not supposed to be that's a lie. I'm running through my slides because, shoo, hold on for me. Okay, so then those are then the raptures. And the other rapture then, of course, that people never speak about is how the Afrikaners, the rapture, there was a post-apartheid rapture. So if you speak to people, and this is one famous thing that people know about Oranje, there's no black people there. No black people work there. And when people are like, this is an example of classic apartheid. In actual fact, if you read that one, I'll read it for you. It says, so Oranje broke with that fundamentally, the practice of black labor, when we said that we will never ever misuse anybody again for labor purposes. And the system of cheap black labor is something that we are going to break with, and we are going to do our own work. Eyewerk. Eye is a very specific term. You know, we will clean our own toilets. We will work our own lands. We will build our own houses. And then we can also stand proud and say, that is what we achieved. This is a quote from some place to get to where they need to be, and then eventually go home when it's like 7 o'clock. According to, because the Rainbow Nation, Oranje does not agree with the concept of a Rainbow Nation. And I'll read you why. The person says, I believe we have different cultures, the Xhosa culture, Zulu culture, and Afrikaner culture, and those should be celebrated. And if the celebration of individual cultures really happens, then I guess we would be a rainbow nation. But now we are just a gray nation of any kind of gray culture, general South African culture, and that takes away from a whole lot of people. So that's the second rapture. In Oranje, you can't talk about a rainbow nation because they don't agree with the concept. The rest of South Africa, rainbow nation, in Oranje, it's a place where they celebrate being Afrikaner, because what they are not in agreement with is this culture where we are all just South African. They want to be very specific about who they are. So that's the set of second rapture away from in post-apartheid. And of course, Oranje has its own money. There's a picture there for you. It was taken through a glass thing, that's why it looks so shiny, but that's sort of the third rapture, where they're like, in order for us not to participate in South Africa, we need not to use South African money. So you see those three raptures are very specific, right? And so you sort of have this thing where they came from the ancestral land, and then they had to move. So there's been a lot of displacement when it comes to the Afrikaner and settling in South Africa. But finally, I think Oranje's legacy that is very proudly celebrated in Oranje is the Afrikaner history. I don't know, I'm sure many of you have seen this picture. It's like bus it's on a hill, like on top of the town, and you get there and you have these bars. Vervoort is one of those bars, and Kruger is the latest one that's shining on this side. But that bus signifies how Oranje celebrates the Afrikaner history. Vervoort used to be there. I think he was the center. Mandela then went, and I think they had a whole thing, and then they took him off. And I'll get to this later when I speak about how there's hidden legacies in Oranje. You know how we all don't, well, I assume that most people don't like Vervoort. not in Oranje. He has a museum in Oranje. And the Tlengrius, can tell you now, is actually inspired by Verwoerd. So even though he's not there at the center, his ideology lives through the Tlengrius. And if you can't read through that, you and I will say, no, but they remove Verwoerd. No, they don't. The Tlengrius is a symbolism of his idea. I think the Tlengrius was drawn after he had a speech about rolling up your sleeves and doing your own work. So the Tlengrius, I'm sorry I don't have a better picture of him. The small little male guy there is rolling up his sleeves to work, because that is when the narrative started about doing our own work so we can, prosper our own settings, right? So there's a very clear understanding that, Afrikaner culture is definitely, it's a gift that they keep managing very well in Oranje. And of course, Afrikaans, the language. Now I know there's a lot of politics. I'm not going to get into them. I'll leave that to Bridget. I see she's busy. She's ready for us. I'll leave that to her to do. But you see the picture there about Betria, Tutria, Aftria, Antria. That is a very simple example of how it's everywhere. There is supposed to be a, what you call this thing when you cross the street? Yeah, it's supposed to be a pedestrian crossing. It's a sort of stop street. But, they play around with the language. So everywhere, you don't need to doubt. You walk in and you know. I know we speak Afrikaans here. The street names are all in Afrikaans. People greet you in Afrikaans. Those who know me, I speak Afrikaans. And I think out of all the times that I never knew Afrikaans would benefit me, because when I came to the Western Cape, I was then made to believe being black and Afrikaans is a problem. Speaking Afrikaans is a problem. Then I went to Oranje and I realized that Afrikaans has benefited me and will benefit me continuously, because whether we like it or not, it's one of South Africa's lingua francas, right? And so if you wonder how I got to manage to do the work, I spoke Afrikaans. And this is what when we call some sort of, some insiderness, not completely because, vibes, but in terms of I could have a conversation and I could understand those nuances, because I've been taught in Afrikaans, right? And of course, then as you can see, a legacy that is kept very well, excessively well, in Oranje is definitely Afrikaans, right? And so, of course, now we move to these ruptured legacies. But what has been torn apart, right? And of course, the first one is Stokkiesdraai. I must tell you. So I took this picture and I thought, another example, Afrikaans, dominant, Oranje. And then I was like, something else must be happening here. So I like reading. Being a nerd is a good thing. So I'm reading there and I'm going through Verwoerd things and stuff. And then I found out that Verwoerd and his wife used to have a farm called Stokkiesdraai. And I was like, but didn't you say that you were trying to minimize Verwoerd's presence in Oranje? Then I was like, it's like the same with the Tlengrius. This is another way, because if you walk past Stokkiesdraai, would you know? You'd be like, Stokkiesdraai. I'm assuming they waste time there, do funny things, play. It's an entertainment side. But this is one of the clever ways where they have kept Verwoerd alive in Oranje, but not explicitly, because there has been resistance against what he represents, right? So you sort of have this ruptured legacy. We tore away from you, but then we stitched you back together. And now it looks awkward, so we're just going to call you Stokkiesdraai, right? You still following me? Right? And of course then, there it is. That's the museum. It's called Verwoerd Gedenksversameling. That is the museum of Hendrik Verwoerd. One of the few pictures I have of the museum, simply because you can't take pictures in the museum. But it is located at his former house where him and his wife stayed. It has been turned into a museum, and everything Verwoerd is there. Everything. Even the clothes in which he was assassinated, they are there. Right? It's an interesting site to go visit. I would just urge you, when you do go, to understand where you stand with your history and to not be triggered. Because as a black person walking into that space, I was just like, I don't know what's going on. And listen, it was like, we can go in, it's open. I was like, no, huh? what, my ancestors, what? Because now here's this black person going into this white space, and museums are places where we celebrate people. Museums are where we keep information that we want to know. And I'm walking and I'm like, hey, yeah, ne? And I'm walking and it feels awkward and it feels a bit strange, but I'm now a researcher. Now I can't be a black person anymore. The black person just stood outside and I picked that person up. I was like, come, let's go. We'll deal with you when we are in the car. And when the black person and I got back into the car together and the researcher and the black person came together, I was like, I'm sorry. Black person, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I did not, I'm sorry I left you. But what actually happened was I realized that we are healing. Or, you know, me and this person, we are healing. The researcher and Lorato, the black person, we are healing. And so I could look at Verwoerd space and speak to it as a researcher and not as a person who still struggles with the aftermath of apartheid. So, yeah, it's an interesting space to be in. It's been critiqued quite a lot, but look, there's a couple of other museums in South Africa we can give the side eye to. I'm just saying. So, another example, of course, of ruptured legacy is this flag. Do we recognize the colors of this flag? What did we call this flag? I heard it. Oranje? Yes. Right? So this flag has the Kleinreus on it. Now you need to understand this flag. So I ask about this flag. And I'm like, what's going on with this flag? Like, no. So Kleinreus is like the mascot in Oranje. There's Kleinreus on everything. Kleinreus there, Kleinreus here, Kleinreus everywhere. Right? Because he is the new type of identity that they're striving towards, where they do their own work. And I would encourage you, the word Eya, I don't have time to explain, but the word Eya is so central to apartheid. Volks Eya, ons Eya, right? Everything about our own. Essentially, if you think about apartheid, the point was really that we all have our own, but then it sort of flopped because our own didn't look the same, so went a bit south, right? So now if you think about this one specific symbol that is everywhere, including on top of the monument hill, we have the blue, and I asked about these colors and I was just told that this was sort of taken from the history. But then they didn't put the three flags that used to be in the Ranja Banja blow in the middle. They put Kleinreus in the middle to symbolize sort of a move away from that identity and from that history. But friends like you and I know, you can change the frame, no? But I mean, the colors are the same. And so it leaves us to wonder. But the woman was very specific when she spoke about it, that they have kept a piece of their history that they want to associate with. And there's another thing I picked up about Oranje, that nobody is trying to run away from the fact that, you know, there were bad things that happened in the past. But it also does not mean that were not good things. And I'm not saying that I agree with this, but this is just what I picked up about the time that I spent in Oranje. And of course then, you have that flag is called exactly that, and there's still some remnants of it in Oranje, right? Now, in almost conclusion, we have the Cook Sister Monument, and I'm bringing this up because when I spoke on Sunday, I spoke about how we need to start thinking of the Northern Cape beyond its borders. Right? And so for those of you who do not know, Oranje does have a Cook Sister Monument. You can see it. It looks very goldish. And the picture right next to it is the plaque that is like at the very bottom of the Cook Sister Monument. It's written in Afrikaans, but I'm not here for the translation. It's there because it says that the second paragraph says Cook Sisters originally come from Indonesia, and glasses work. Came to het deur middel van Kaapse slawe vir Afrikaans. So the Cook Sisters originated from Indonesia, but they were sort of localized by the Cape slaves, right? And so the point I was trying to make when I said we need to start thinking about the Northern Cape beyond its borders, not just its provincial borders, but the Northern Cape generally outside of the country, right? So you see how this is an example of how the Cook Sister really is not new to South Africa, nor is it indigenous to South Africa. But just say the word Cook Sister, we all know what we're about to eat, right? And so that in Oranje, the Koeksister symbolizes for them the strength and the perseverance of the woman that would pay Koeksisters every time there was a church to be built. They're like, Koeksister away. Whenever they need something, they're like, Koeksister away. And so it also, so they have this whole explanation. But the point I'm trying to make there is that when you see this, you understand that our history as the Northern Cape is beyond the Northern Cape, right? And so we need to start thinking about that for future purposes, for future research, but also how we just think about the research that we do. And that we don't always imagine that we are a province and we are special and we are small and we are the overlooked. You know, that we start thinking about us as being bigger because our history is quite significant and intertwined with other histories. This is another example of why we should be thinking about the Northern Cape beyond its own borders. You will see that right at the bottom a bunch of words that you and I can't read because they're written in Dutch and German. But this is Narina, interestingly. Narina is a place where I think young women stay, in Oranje. So, in Oranje, there's a place where people who work that are unmarried, young women stay, and young men stay. This is the one that is outside the young women's place. It's called Narina, and I forgot the other name. But the point we're trying to make is that I remember we were driving in the car, and I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. And the lady said, yeah, my mother was so glad to find out that men and women that are unmarried don't stay together. You know, there must be a separation, you know. Also, that speaks to this whole very Christian way of understanding what companionship is, and a very, you know, that moral compass, right? So the reason why that is there, that we can have a conversation about some other time. The reason why this is there is to show you that Oranje still has links to what we call the ancestral lands. And you don't have to look very far. I think they recently went and they asked them for help. They want international friends. I think that's what they call it. Oranje wants international friends. And so you can see that Oranje, we might never mind it, but not everybody's never minding it. And so there's a thing about thinking about, but what is actually happening here? And what does this board tell us, right? And what does it reinforce, right? And so, of course, then that's an example of how Oranje still operates out of South African borders. And of course, this monument, and lo and behold, Oranje is a fan of going to take monuments that no people like that are related to the Afrikaners. They go fetch them. I met a school principal who the school was called IF Vervoerd, and Vervoerd's bust was in the middle of the school, and they changed the school name, but then they were struggling what they're going to do with the bust. And somehow, somebody found them like, we will get the bust from you, please. And that past is now in Oranje. So Oranje, like they versamel things that relate to the Afrikaners and to Vervoerd. This is the Ierse monument, and they got this. I think people were like, okay, you know, we don't know why this thing is doing it. And they're like, give it, we'll take it. So this is, as you go up the copy, you will find this like at the very bottom, and this monument just really speaks to how I think it was about 500 people from Ireland who helped the Boer fight in a war, and that's why it's there, so they can just commemorate those people who helped them, that were on their side, that fought the same war that they fought, right? So as you will see, there's another international connection that we don't want to think through or are not thinking through yet about Oranje, right? And of course, so like I said on Sunday, while really it remains true that it is a Northern Cape thing, we need to think and talk about the Northern Cape outside of its borders and outside of South African borders in a bid to grapple with its history, its rich history, and the extent to which the past continues to weave itself in our present and future. And I think Oranje is a brilliant example of how we can do that, although it's a bit hidden, and I know it's a bit scary to do the work, but I think it's a brilliant example of the type of work we can do to see where our history lies with each other and how there are certain things that we can pick up. Last point, Knoffelskraal. Knoffelskraal, it's in Grabouw, close to Grabouw. They were like, if they can have on Oranje, we can have a Knoffelskraal. So we need to start thinking about these legacies and these ruptures. And in closing, Oranje is helping a community in the Eastern Cape to build their own sort of independence from government. Because another thing you must also understand about Oranje, the dependence on government does not work out for them. They don't form part of a local municipality. They have a municipality, right? And so they run everything for themselves and by themselves. And so I forget this place's name, but you can find this on the internet, where they literally went, they came and they spoke to the people in the Eastern Cape. They were like, teach us how we can also be independent of government. And I think while a lot of things can be said about Oranje and not be said about Oranje, not everything is bad about what they do, and of course not everything is good. But as researchers and as people who are vested in communities, it's our job to find out. Thank you.
We need to get the audio. We're still live.
Hi. Schools. Do they fall under the South Africa curriculum in the schools? What do they teach their children? And how do their children integrate then coming into the rest of the system?
And I never got the sense that of what they teach the students, you know. But I think that school is not, I've seen that school somewhere too, I think in Pretoria, it's CVO or something. But it's a school that is not, it's like Huro, you know, it's around. Yeah, it's independent. But I did ask about the history that the kids get taught and the relationship with Afrikaans. And I remember, I think I spoke to 2 teachers who said that they teach their children the history. The problem though is that just as much as we're sitting on the other side saying, hey, you are telling our history wrong, they also on the other side, hey, you're teaching our history wrong. Because when we think about Afrikaner history, we think bad, 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 bad. While they thinking, hey, there were some goods. And if we're gonna sustain an Afrikaner culture, an Afrikaner narrative that is positive, we need to tell the good too. So I walked away understanding that what they teach is a combination of the good and the bad that happened, but not looking down on their own people. That's the understanding I got. I hope that answers you.
Any questions? Let me take it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll start with Bob.
Just very, very brief. What is the population of Oranje?
I actually don't know the latest stats because it's growing.
We can Google.
They actually keep growing Oranje. I think they extending Oranje because people are really interested in staying there. So it keeps growing. I know the last time I was there, they were extending Klinkgeluk, which is a residential area in Oranje, but they keep growing. Surprisingly, they keep growing. Sorry, Bob.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mokoena. I appreciate your input. So I have 2 questions for you. One is a methodological question, and I was really intrigued by how you, the researcher and the black person, how you were able to, you know, separate the 2 of you. So I just wanted to ask you, so what was the impact on the black person? And because you spoke about the researcher mostly today, but maybe what was the impact on you? And then the second question is, and I really think that the way you're proposing, what you're proposing here is that maybe we need to almost, there needs to be a rupture in our own minds about how we think about Oranje. And Oranje has been in the popular discourse over the past few months. Obviously, it's leading up to a national election. But my question is, so what can we learn? What does Oranje, you know, teach us? What lessons can we learn from Oranje? And how can we apply that in our everyday lives? Thank you.
Okay. So I'll start with the last question because I think it's the most easy question because the black person is still going to answer, you see. So, and I'm speaking about myself because I've been there. The first thing to start. So me and Jacob went to Appington 26 one time and all the 26 people were painted. We even spoke to the guy that worked there, right? And so when we came back and went back to Appington 26, one of the guy's face was painted out. And so we were shocked. And then we Googled, because we were like, we know this face was here. And so Google said that the guy, that was a sign of resistance. He was tired of the guy not listening, tired of the empty promises the government gave the people who were part of the struggle. So he erased himself from, which is a very difficult thing to do, right? And so I think for me, the memorialization definitely is being intentional about serving people. I think the intentionality about saying, hey, look, our people are not going to struggle, regardless of what happens. And of course, the linguist, it's just how they take care of their language. Might not always, because Afrikaans is an ever-changing language, but they do take care of it. You walk in Oranje, Afrikaans is, I do linguistic landscaping, so I'm very interested in about which language comes on top and the bottom. Afrikaans is always on top. In pure Afrikaans. And another interesting thing about Oranje, and this is in line with the research with renaming of the what was it? Winnie Madikizela. In Oranje, they're not bothered. I asked this or stuff that are named after people. They said it goes against our religion. We serve God. We have one God. That's it. The rest, flowers, trees, you name them. Not one street will you find that is named after a person, because for them that's a sign of. For us, we call it common. You turn and Nelson GPS is like Nelson Mandela again. So that doesn't happen in Oranje. Nelson Mandela, sorry. But yeah, you see the point I'm trying to make, right? So then I think there's a lot of things we can learn, Trevor, honestly, from Oranje. Enough. But we just don't want to, because we have been saturated in the narrative of trying to keep apartheid alive. I'll let you know, talking to me, a paper, and right in the beginning of the paper, the person said, but if you think about it, Oranje is no different from most South African locations. White people stay here, colored people stay there. Be live now, but it troubled my mind. There might be some truth there. Might not be, because we know why we're racially segregated spatially, but the fact that it's still being done that way, and then we look at Oranje, we're like, why is only white people staying there? We're like, yeah, well, go to the suburbs. I felt like I didn't belong. This is not about Oranje. I'm talking about a person, me, how I was raised, how I hear conversations about Oranje and about black people, and I think that's why the person had to go there, because though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death. Amen.
3 more questions.
Yes.
3 more questions. Then we have to. Mukwena, what's the time there?
5 minutes to 10.
5 minutes to 10. There's other people. We have to give
Yes.
Bridget a chance.
Yes,
so I'll
definitely.
take. We have to give
Yes.
Bridget a chance.
Yes,
so I'll take 3 short questions. So
We're all in this ecosystem and we together, so there is.
No, it's definitely a matter of, as long as we're all in this ecosystem, it doesn't matter. But that doesn't erase class. It doesn't erase the fact that a petrol attendant will never be, paid as this person. But so what they do is, everybody must have a job. Everybody must benefit. But of course, now if you're a business owner and if you're a teacher, we're benefiting differently, right? But what is interesting, however, is that there is. So the area I was told you was being expanded is called Klein Geluk. Small beginnings, small luck. I don't know of anything else to translate it as. But that is where the people that are not so economically fortunate reside. And there's sort of a subsidy to help them, right? And there's this place called Keierstoep, where it's like a bunch of shops where people can go and they make, and Keierstoep is another exciting thing one day when I have time. And then we can go and people of their sponsored signage for those businesses who can't afford their own signage. It must just have clingers on and, all of those logistics. But there is to be, because not everybody can be is in the same standing. But what the intention about everybody must eat from the same pie, even though we don't take the same bites. That is what stands out sort of for me in Oranje. I haven't seen anything else. So whoever says, no, they're not all biting from the pie, can come through. But from what I understand, we can all just bite on the same pie. Might not be the same pieces, but we're all biting, which also addresses the race problem. The white poor problem that was happened before apartheid, that problem about white people being poor does not sit well. And so it's still being solved through Oranje. But that's conversation for another day.
Yeah, Lorato, thank you. So, yeah, now I have also now a better understanding of Oranje because I was also a history based on apartheid.
Yeah.
But obviously for Oranje it's easier
Yeah.
to create such a
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
because of the identity.
Yeah.
In colored communities, for instance, where we struggle with that identity, how would we go about dealing with such an issue in colored communities, where we are colored, yet we try to connect our indigenous heritage?
I will admit it is easier. Or remember, Oranje actually is an example of the few. One of the examples nobody speaks about in South Africa of forced removal. I don't know if people know this, but people from Oranje were forced removed when they bought the land. I think there was a saying about, I'm not too sure who said it, but the person said, look, I bought the bus, not with passengers inside. So the passengers must go. So it is easier because they have the money to buy land. It's much easier. But also, here's the other thing. Just because they're all staying, well, the people who stay in Oranje stay there, and they appear to be harmoniously living together, does not mean there are not identity struggles. Identity struggles are everywhere. It doesn't, because remember, I spoke to somebody who's from Dutch and who's from Germany, and with that comes its own struggles. And somebody did allude to the fact that although it looks harmonious, it's not always the case. It can't be the case. We're human beings. So then to your question about how the colored community does it, it's not a matter of how we can follow in that example. It's a matter of reconciling who we want to be. And I think that's a very tricky thing we haven't done. And this is the other thing. I think me and Bob were having the conversation this morning, a beautiful conversation about believing in something which you understand. And this is the type of understanding you're going to have about something you believe in. When it comes to the people in Oranje, they don't force you to stay there. You must apply to stay there. You can't just walk up and be like, yeah, I saw that house, buying it. No, you must apply to stay there, which means you must associate yourself with the ideals. So the moment you do that and you understand, then it's sorted. And then I ask, so what if somebody comes and they don't speak Afrikaans? Then that person needs to ask themselves why they want to stay here. And it's the same thing. If we are going to call ourselves colors or say we are from the Khoi or we're from the sun, struggling amongst it and we don't know what to do, we need to make up our own minds. And I think for the longest of time, nobody...
Wrong, and denial of the Holocaust is illegal, at least in the public sphere.
Yeah.
So when you enter into Iran and you speak to the people who live there, is there some kind of general understanding that apartheid and colonialism was wrong, should not have happened? I know that they say there may be good things and bad things that happen in their history, but do they understand that it was unethical or for those systems to have taken place here in South Africa?
I'll be honest with you. That was not a boat I was willing to rock. Because you see, as a researcher, you must be clear. If you ask the right questions, you will get the answers that will help you what people are thinking. And so I couldn't go in and be like, do you know apartheid was wrong? Because we would never have had this presentation. And when you enter these spaces, you need to fashion your questions and your research methodology in such a way that you don't antagonize people who already are antagonized. Because otherwise, we don't get to do research. And so what I got a sense of is that nobody said that apartheid was all right or all wrong, like I said. Colonialism we didn't touch about because in as much as they said, look, there are certain things we're definitely not going to incorporate into the new Oranje. It's already a way of saying there are certain things we need to distance ourselves from, whether it's for political reasons or for identity reasons, each their own. But there has been a sense of, look, this is the new Oranje we are trying to be. And unfortunately, I couldn't ask that question, Danielle, but I don't think everybody in Oranje says that apartheid was all wrong or all right. I think that we all have our understanding of what should have happened and what didn't happen. And one of the quotes I actually had on the reason Oranje was not conceived a couple of years before apartheid ended. It started in the 60s and 70s when they understood that this thing of oppressing black people is not sustainable. One of the quotes said that, sorry, I skipped it. They understood from a long time ago it was there was too much violence. Things were not working out, you know, and they were the minority. So then Oranje became a place where it was their plan B in order for them to sustain themselves, people. So they knew something was going wrong with apartheid, and they knew it was wrong. But it does not mean that they were not going to find a plan B. And plan B happened to be Oranje, where they could ensure the survival of the Afrikaners. That is essentially what Oranje essentially really is about. The survival of the Afrikaners after all of that displacement and ruptures I've spoken about, to a place where they can settle and create their own new type of legacy. But we can go back and ask Daniel, you and I. Okay, Jacob, thank you.
Righto, let's give Lorato a brave hand of applause. I must commend her. I will never went into that specific space, and it shows the maturity of a researcher that I still have to do. And it's something that sometimes we constantly have to reflect on, is how much of your biases are seeping into research and how you present as the gospel truth out there. And one of the things that I advise a lot of researchers to do, put your biases there so that people can see it as it's on the table. And I'm glad that Lorato was so open with the struggles, the two types of thing, the researcher and the black person, how they have to separate that two. It's a brave job, so I commend her for that. So I'll give you guys a 5-minute breather because this was quite heavy. It's certainly crop. So don't leave the venue. You can stand up until Bridget can set up. Bridget, so play it. Yay, yay. Jy klik.
Go.
You sit here up until I introduce you. I don't know why. Okay.
No?
Gaan het Afrikaans of Engels? Gaan het Afrikaans of Engels? See, I must introduce you first. Right, so ladies. Is going to be passed on, please. Wait. Yes, I need to scratch out. Namakwalan's stories, my bro. Please don't leave the venue. Okay, you guys go to the side stage. Okay, cool. Yes, jullie moeten het tekenen. Yes. I need to leave myself. Jerry, just shake the hands. Just the downstairs. Right, good morning. Klute is back. So what us van ek kom is alles 'n ding. Alright, so I'm going to try and use my moist Afrikaans to bring the politics forward. So Bridget, where is okay, a biography. So I'll just introduce her as Bridget, an honor student from Colloquium University. Was from Colloquium University. So on your way to UWC. Hey, my bro. Like you're on. Okay. You see, except. So we want your work at UWC. It's on Namakolans Afrikaans, and then we.
It's die program. Dit is die woorde wat ek aan my Kaapse vriendin geuiter het. Ter verwysing na die swaar reën, die gedrein, né? En die blits. Sondag het die afkap. No, my pre, why are you swearing like that? Hey! Toe kan my hierdie kalvertien is. Toe kan my ek is, want na Makolans Afrikaans gaat korisen. Ek is Dr. Brand, gebore en getoe in 'n Makolan. Kyk hier, hierdie môre van vanmôre. Hierdie môre van vanmôre. Ek gaan met julle sit in kort. So, sit back, relax and enjoy. Nou sien julle die broeke qua scenario. Wat ek nou hy gesprek tussen my Kaapse toe maar besluit wag. Kom ek doen my storie oor die misverstande. Wat kan plaasvind tussen gesprekke, né? Gesprekke tussen sprekers. So, in gesprekke tussen sprekers. Hersê. My hoofdoel van hierdie studie is om die moontlike misverstande na aanleiding hierdie teks, na Makolanse stories, saamgestel deur Kilson, né? Dit is saamgestel deur Kilson vanuit 'n pragmatiese benadering. 'n pragmatiese benadering te ondersoek. Hersê. En ja, kyk hier, om baie belangrik bewusmaking van 'n Makolanse Afrikaans mee te bring. Hersê. Nou 'n Makolanse Afrikaans. Hier vergeet ek. Waar is ek nou? As is vir inleiding. Hersê. Nou 'n Makolanse Afrikaans, né? Word deur 'n hoë mate invloed. Afrikaans. Ek is 'n bietjie vinnig. Okay, kalmeer. Kalmeer. Hierdie nuwe standaard variëteit is hoofsaaklik 'n subordinaat, né? 'n subvariëteit van die superordinaat of sambrielterm Gariep Afrikaans. Nou, die taalgemeenskappe in die Nood-Kaap, hulle maak gebruik van verskillende praatstyle. Nodeloos om te sê, daar is kommunikasieprobleme wanneer sprekers van verskillende variëteite ontmoet. Moontlike misverstande kan ook plaasvind tussen die lesers en die tekste van die Makolanse Afrikaans as gevolg van die feit dat sommige lesers nie vertroud is met die Makolanse variëteit nie. My mondjie is droog. Nou onthou, my navorsingsvraag. Hoe kan moontlike misverstande vanuit 'n pragmatiese oogpunt in 'n literêre teks soos Namakolandse stories plaasvind. Nou in my studie het ek, en julle gaan hoor, ek repeat moontlike misverstande, né? Want is baie belangrik, kern. So, in my studie het ek die moontlike misverstande ondersoek wat toegeskryf kan word aan die spraakhandelingsteorie wat deur John Austin in 1962 geïdentifiseer was, as ook die verontagsaming van Paul Grice se koöperatiewe beginsel. Ok, net so kortliks, in Cutting se boek Pragmatics word spraakhandelinge gedefinieer as die betekenisse van woorde wat geuiter word. So, enige uiting in kommunikasie, nee, word verwys na as 'n spraakhandeling. Die spraakhandelingsteorie bestaan uit lokusionêre handeling, dit is die spesifieke betekenisse, nee. Tweedens, illokusionêre handeling, wat 'n bepaalde effek meebring. En dan, derdens, daar is die perlokusionêre handeling, waardeur 'n bepaalde effek verkry word. Aan die ander kant, argumenteer Hardy dat Paul Grice se koöperatiewe beginsel gebaseer is op die aanname dat gespreksgenote met mekaar moet saamwerk om suksesvolle kommunikasie te fasiliteer. Semanties, nee, wacht. Daarbenewens het Grice hierdie beginsel uitgebrei met 4 gesprekreëls of voorwaardes. Naamlik kwantiteit, kwaliteit, relevantie en wyse. Desniettenstaande, indien deelnemers hierdie gespreksvoorwaarde oortree of verontagsaam, vind daar misverstande plaas. Soos, maak 'n voorbeeld, ek sê nou vir Esther. Ek sê, Esther, is ek aan jou koeroe. Hey? En Esther sê vir my, hierdie kind, hou op sy koud so oral in jou water. Die kabbebrood brand daar op die stoof. Nou, my verwagting was mis nou gewees, dat ek om is hulle broek. Esther praat van koud so oral en die kabbebrood wat brand op die stoof. Nee man, Esther man, ons daar is 'n miscommunicasie tussen ons, verstaan jy? So dit is waar het inkom. Nou gaan ons oor na die probleemstelling toe. Toe kom ek by my probleemstelling, nee. Moontlike misverstande kan ook in 'n Namakolandse Afrikaans voorkom, soos dit die geval is van enige ander taal. Jy het julle hom? Nee. Die Nood-Kaapse streeksvariëteite maak gebruik van veelvuldige uitdrukkings wat eie is aan die streek. Romario, nou gaan ons nou leer vanaand lekker koubroe, né? Koubroe is eie aan die streek, is partytjie loopbou. Voorbeeld, né? Semanties gesproke beteken die woord koubroe partytjie. Hersê. Nou hierdie frase kan lei tot 'n pragmatiese misverstand. Aangesien daar 'n afstand, nee, is tussen die pragmatiese verwagtinge van die ontvanger van die boodskap en die werklike bedoelde uiting van daardie boodskap. Alhoewel talle studies al oor die Namakolandse Afrikaans oor Gariep Afrikaans onderneem is, het ek, soos toe ek my navorsing doen, byna geen literatuur oor die variëteit van 'n Namakolandse Afrikaans vanuit 'n pragmatiese benadering, nee, gekry nie. Inteendeel, ek het wel slegs op literatuur afgekom wat hierdie variëteit vanuit 'n variasionele sosio-linguistiese perspektief, ondersoek was. Okay. Nou gaan ons oor na my konseptuele raamwerk. Ek wil nou hierdie prentjie lekker becheck. Hierdie kombinasie, die kombinasie van die spraakhandelingsteorie, en Grys se koöperatiewe beginsel vorm my konseptuele raamwerk van hierdie studie. Trouwens, word hierdie kombinasie as 'n instrument gebruik om die misverstande te verduidelik, wat op 2 vlakke val. Dit kan op 2 vlakke val. Eerstens, soos julle kan sien, vlak 1 is die moontlike misverstande wat plaasvind tussen die karakters of die gespreksgenote in die teks self, in hierdie teks self. Alhoewel hierdie deelnemers in die teks vertroud is met die Namakolandse variëteit, kan moontlike misverstande nog steeds plaasvind. Dit kan. Omdat, hoekom? Want hulle verontagsaam die gespreksreëls. Hulle kom nie die gespreksvoorwaarde, hulle kom met die na nie. Dit is waar die misverstande inkom. Nou vlak 2, dui op die moontlike misverstande wat plaasvind buite die teks. Dit is nou tussen, met ander woorde, tussen die leser en die teks. Sommige lesers wat buite die taalgemeenskap van die Namakoland woonagtig is onkundig oor die Namakolandse variëteit. En dit kan moontlik lei tot misverstande. Nou hier kom ons by die reël Makoya. Wag hou my tyd. Arsy, ontleding. In ons ontleding van die literêre teks, Namakolandse stories, is die metode wat ek gebruik het om die data vir hierdie studie te ontleed. In my studie het ek gebruik gemaak van 10 voorbeelde, maar wensomstandighede buite my beheer, soos ek heb nou gewys het 5 minute, kan ek nie nog langer praat. Want anders gaan ek heel lastig in klore met julle. Okay, as ons kyk na voorbeeld 1. Ons kyk na voorbeeld 1. Op die stoep deur Magde de Klerk. Piet druk die voordeur van binnekant af. In sy een hand het hy sy koerant, in die ander sy tabak en pep. As Piet iets so gelaai uit die huis kom, is dit verlangs sit op die stoep. In die kombuis hoor jy die net potte en borde. Raas ons aan die Griet, dan die Griet haastig weeskaf om op die stoep te kom sit. Spreekwoord 1 sê, Piet sê vir hom aan die Griet: "Vrou, vir wat draai jy weer vanmorgen so? Bring 'n kurk droog, sommer 'n kurk droog van touler agter jou aan. Jy sal moet roer, vrou, as jy nie wil missie. Dit lyk na 'n woelige Saterdag. Hoor jy die toulig die mense hier langsan?" Dan die Griet kom skuifel aan met 2 koppies koffie. "Jere Piet, wat sê norske weer so? Dink jy die skoolgoed gaan hulle self was?" Okay. Nou, na aanleiding van die lokasionêre handeling in spreekbeurt 1 is daar verwagtinge betrokke, sodat die illokasionêre handeling moet slaag. Eerstens, die spreker Piet sy vraag: "Vrou, vir wat draai jy weer vanmorgen so?" Verlang dus inligting, deur dit daar van die hoorder, dan die Griet, verwag word om daarop te reageer. Die spreker se intensie is eintlik dat hy wil hê dat die hoorder by hom moet kom sit op die stoep. Sodat sy nie moet mis wat gebeur nie. Hulle is baie verpaarig, maar okay. Hierdie vraag is op 'n indirekte wyse gestel. Die lokisie in hierdie geval slaag, omdat die hoorder wel op die stoep gaan sit, soos die spreker verwag. Nou, met betrekking tot die bevelsillokisie, bring sommer 'n kurk droog van touder agter jou aan. Rig die spreker 'n opdrag aan die hoorder. Die Namakolandse woord tou beteken iets te drinke. Die frase dit lyk na 'n woelige saterdag. Kan ook na 'n moontlike misverstand lei as gevolg van die Namakolandse woord lyk, wat na 'n koppelwerkwoord lyk beteken. Na die koppelwerkwoord lyk beteken. Met verwysing na die kulturele agtergrondkennis, verstaan die gespreksgenote in die teks mekaar ten volle, omdat beide moontlik van Namakolandse Afrikaans is. Nou, met verwysing na die konteksbeskrywing, het hy die Griet vir oom Piet 'n koppie koffie gebring. Nou, ek dink nie, ek het baie tyd om die hele goedjies te sê nie, maar oké. Die gespreksvoorwaarde van wyse word verontagsaam, omdat die spreker in spreekwoord en indirek van die hoorder verwag om vinnig te maak. Dit word deur die sin, jy sal moet roervrou gesuggereer, wat egter beteken dat die vrou nie die pot moet roer nie, maar dat sy moet vinnig maak. Die spreker verwag van die hoorder om iets te doen. In werklikheid beteken die woord koulag eenvoudig net uitspattig lag. Of hardop lag. Die leser wat nie met die Namakolandse woord koulag kan identifiseer nie, mag moontlik die gesprek misverstaan. Dan die Griet verontagsaam ook eintlik die gespreksvoorwaarde van relevantie, want haar antwoord wat sy vir hom gee is indirek en nie relevant tot sy vorige uiting nie. Wat sy eintlik by oom Piet wil tuisbring, is dat hy nie druk op haar moet plaas, om vinnig te wees nie, want sy wil die skorrelgoed klaar was. Dit is echter duidelik in die bogenoemde gesprek, dat moontlike misverstande op vlak 1 kan plaasvind, omdat die gespreksvoorwaardes van wyse, relevantie en relevantie verontagsaam word. Dan kan ons verder sê dat die gesprek van indirekte taalhandeling wemel. In die woorde liek, kou en is eintlik kou en koulag verstaan nie. Kou. Kan die gesprek moontlik tot misverstande lei. Die teks bevat Namakolandse uitdrukkings waarmee sommige lesers buite die taalgemeenskap van Namakoland nie vertroud is nie, en daarom kan die gesprek op vlak 2 misluk. Oké. Voorbeeld 2. Check of ek nou iets gedruk. Kom red met hier. Klaar maak. Ek is van plan om klaar te maak. Ek skiep gevernig. Oké. Ek het nou net een voorbeeld gebruik. Kom ons gaan na my bevindinge toe. Ek het bevind dat dit duidelik moontlik is dat misverstande wel plaasvind, in die teks, tussen die lesers, as ook tussen die karakters, as ook tussen die lesers en die teks homself. So ter conclusie. Ek is navorsing van hierdie studie, het die gestelde doelwitte bereik. En ek is baie bly dat ek weer eens bewusmaking mee kan bring oor Namakolandse Afrikaans. My naam is Dr. Brandt en ek toon nie oor my taal nie, ek na my taal. Want in Namakoland praat ons van konsekwent, van 'n deel van my moedertaal. In Namakoland is ons nie kuierig nie, ons is nie kuierig nie, want ons ken van krabbebrood en kuiens en sommer 'n lang Java. So moet nog lang klinken nie. Weet net, Namakolandse Afrikaans is getoerisen. Beetje lesoen toe. And I thank you.
Daar is enige mense wat vra, maar net voor, wow, daai hande te vinnig opgaan. Julle gaan nie kasekind hier sê nie, asseblief. Is deel van die moedertaal, maar dit is ook 'n vloekwoord. Streeksgewys is ook 'n vloekswoord. So asseblief, ons gaan nie kasekind uitspreek nie. So 1, 2, wie is daar nog? Oké. Ons gaan die 2 vat.
Okay. Okay, so is nice om te weet dat iemand nou vernam kan, soos ek kom sê. Ook, okay. Wat ek wil sê is dat, is net 'n comment dat, wat ek agterkom wat ook 'n spreker is van dieselfde dialek van Afrikaans, is dat ek dink dit is besig om kleiner te word in die sens dat ons kinders verwester. Hulle praat nou Engels in die klasgoederse. En van ons erfwoorde wat uit Nama uitkom, is ook die hoe mense dit verstaan en dat wat jy in jou studie wil uitbring, dat daar misverstande kan wees, is dat baie kinders sal nou nie meer eens weet wat is toubroe nie.
Ja.
En want hulle praat om nie meer. Dis dit.
All right, so I'm very sorry. That was dialect specific. I can translate, but it's going to take the whole day. So afterwards, just go to, they can speak English, just have a conversation with them.
For all our guests here, please remember that Namakwaland is not the Northern Cape. And I'm also staying in the Northern Cape. I'm from Louisfontein, and we also have our dialect. And a lot of these words we use in our everyday language. Yet when I go to Namakwaland, I can't stay there for half a day and I want to go home because of those kind of words. It feels like I'm biting on stone. So yes, it's very specific, the Namakwaland language, and you can feel offended. So even from the Northern Cape, I feel extremely offended. If I have a bunch of Namakwaland people around me and they start talking, it's just too much for me.
But there's also generalization that Namakwaland or dit is dit nie. No. Ek moet dit nee. Dat ek kan nie onthou of my ma ooit vir my groot gemaak het met woorde soos daai nie. Ek kan my eie kind nie so groot nie. Maar ek bly mense wat elke dag sê die oom die ander maak hoe kan jy en net omdat en is jy weet hoekom jy en nie. Nee, en as ek teruggaan na die woord my, dan word dit kom dit in die Khoi taal voor en dit beteken basies net verwondering. Dis oor het gekom, maar die konteks daarvan oor tyd het negatief geword. So ons moet daai goed ook binne konteks probeer sien.
Yes.
Arthur het net nou, en ek het nogal kwaad as mense Namakwaland identifiseer met moeilik rondom taal. Want dit is soveel meer as dit. En dit voel vir my dan onmiddellik word dit 'n klas issue. Mense word minder as gemaak as gevolg van hoe hulle taal besig.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bond. I would like to commend you on the way that you've introduced yourself, because I believe that was speaking things into existence. Positive. We as thank you. Inspired that. I've got two things to say. Question and then add on to what is the word that you've used, and I understand what Dr. Klute was just trying to explain regarding the setting, but where you from swearing words give a different definition, because where I'm coming from, swear, but I have to actually explain it in Afrikaans, om te is wanneer jy iemand vervloek. And of these words that we are using every day, you know, to ourselves, because they understand that the definition of it, their interpretation of it was swearing. It were never the intention of the user. I think that's something that also that needs to be looked at. The use in my life is what I'm comfortable with. And, you know, it gives description to what I want to say. You've said something about the, where is that thingy now? The Grice Cooperative principle. Thank you so much, my brother. Spraakhandelingstheorie. I'm unfamiliar with what that is. Do you mind elaborating on that, please? Thank you.
Okay.
We are going to close it there because we are behind. We're going to close it there because we're behind time. So,
Okay.
Bridget,
Dit
kan
nou
die laaste
kort-
vraag antwoord?
Ek wil dit nou kort hou, nee. Die spraakhandelingstheorie. Jy kry 4 van dit, nee. Soos ek sê, dis illocutie. Illocutie en perlocutie. Betekenis, as ek vat verkou, locutie. Kom ek sê, hoekom lyk jy so koubo? Nou, in die woord, hoekom lyk jy so kou? In die frase, hoekom lyk jy so koubo? Hy is nou baie kwaai. Koubo, locutie, nee? Dat beteken, kies ons smaak. Nou, ek verwag dan, van hom af, om vir my te antwoord, so illocutionaire handeling. Nee, ek verwag antwoord van hom, om te sê, nee man, ek is nie koubo nie. Ek lyk maar net so. My bakkies is koei op 0. Verstaan jy? So, dan, as hy vir my antwoord op 0, dan is dat die perlocutionaire handeling, which means, die perlocutie het
Let's give Bridget.
Baie dankie julle.
So, the one thing that I will never apologize for is misunderstanding, because through misunderstanding, if there is dialogue, there comes understanding. So, your concern is noted. And that as a gesprek, it's something that we have. What you're saying is rightfully so. There is this perception that Namakoland's Afrikaans is all about swear words. There is such a rich one. The only thing that I talked about is die ding word gesê so ons moet okay, but jou city op die tafel. So, move on to the next speaker, and then there is also tea time, but I'm not going to cut short the presentation. So what we're going to do is from 22 up until 11 o'clock, we're going to have this session, so then you have your full session. Sophie, can I please have the... So, this one is not getting streamed, so can we please off? No, it's quite very sensitive, so we are not streaming this.